You have likely encountered someone whose presence alone commands attention, not through loud words or aggressive gestures, but through silence. The kind of silence that makes others uneasy, that forces people to listen the moment it breaks. And what you are witnessing is not natural charisma, but calculated control. Because while most people rush to fill every gap with unnecessary words, revealing their insecurity and need for validation, the quiet person does the opposite, observing, choosing, and speaking only when it matters, turning silence into a weapon that builds tension, a shield that protects their thoughts, and a mirror that exposes everyone else. And the uncomfortable truth is this: you don't talk too much because you have more to say. You talk too much because silence makes you anxious. And that anxiety is louder than any words you speak. Section 1. The psychological mechanism of strategic silence. The human mind abhors a vacuum. When information is missing, the brain does not simply accept the absence. It fills the gap with projection, with assumption, with imagination. This is not a flaw in design. It is a feature of how threat assessment evolved. Your ancestors who survived were those who assumed the worst about what they could not see. The rustle in the bushes was not nothing. It was a predator until proven otherwise. The same mechanism operates in social interaction. When you speak constantly, you provide endless data for others to evaluate. They know your opinions. They know your fears. They know your desires. They know your limits. But when someone says very little, they offer no data. And the observing mind, desperate for information, begins to invent it. The silent person becomes mysterious, becomes deep, becomes dangerous, not because of anything they have done, because of what your own mind has projected onto them. This is called the ambiguity effect in social psychology. Humans assign greater weight to negative possibilities when information is incomplete. The silent person benefits from this bias without lifting a finger. You assume they are thinking something profound. You assume they are holding back judgment. You assume they see something you do not. And in that assumption, you have already placed them above you in the social hierarchy. They did not demand that position. You gave it to them because you could not tolerate the silence. This mechanism operates below conscious awareness. You do not decide to project power onto the silent person. It happens automatically, involuntarily, and that is what makes it so effective. The silent person does not have to convince you of anything. Your own brain does the work for them. Section 2. Information asymmetry as a weapon. Every conversation is an exchange of information, and information is power. This is not metaphor. This is structural reality. The person who knows more about you than you know about them holds leverage. The person who reveals less maintains control. When you enter any interaction, you're making a choice about how much of yourself to expose. Most people make this choice poorly. They speak to fill space. They speak to relieve tension. They speak because silence feels like rejection. And in doing so, they hand over a complete psychological profile to anyone who is paying attention. The silent person does the opposite. They observe, they catalogue, they wait. They learn your patterns before revealing anything of their own. This creates a permanent imbalance. You are an open book. They are a locked file cabinet. And because you do not know what they are thinking, you cannot predict their behavior. And because you cannot predict their behavior, you cannot feel safe around them. That unease you feel in the presence of someone who says very little, that is not their problem. That is your disadvantage made visible. They have done nothing except refuse to play the game of compulsive disclosure that most people mistake for connection. And that refusal, in itself, is a form of dominance. They have set the terms, and you have accepted them without negotiation. In intelligence communities, this is known as OPSEC, operational security. The less you reveal, the less an adversary has to work with. The silent person treats every social interaction as an operation. Not because they are paranoid, because they understand that information is the only currency that cannot be printed. Once you give it away, you cannot get it back. Section 3. How silence disrupts social scripts. Social interactions follow predictable scripts. Greeting, small talk, reciprocal disclosure, laughter at appropriate moments, agreement where agreement is expected. These scripts exist to reduce cognitive load. You do not have to think about what to say next because the format tells you. But the silent person breaks the script. They do not offer the expected response. They do not laugh when laughter is signaled. They do not fill the pause after a question. They simply wait. And in that waiting, they transfer the burden of performance entirely onto you. Now you are the one scrambling for words. Now you are the one worrying about the awkward silence. Now you are the one who feels socially inadequate. This is not accidental. This is the mechanism by which silence becomes power. The person who can tolerate discomfort controls the person who cannot. And most people cannot tolerate the discomfort of silence. They will say anything to escape it. They will reveal anything. They will agree to anything. Watch what happens in a negotiation when one party simply stops speaking. The other party will begin to fill the void. First with justifications, then with concessions, then with offers that were never on the table. All because they could not sit in 10 seconds of silence. The silent person did not manipulate them. The silent person simply refused to rescue them from their own discomfort. And in that refusal, extracted value. This is why law enforcement interrogators are trained to use silence as a technique. This is why experienced litigators pause before responding. This is why the most dangerous person in any room is not the one talking. It is the one watching, waiting, saying nothing. The script demands that you perform. The silent person has read the script and decided not to show up for their lines. And there is no rule that says they have to. Section 5. Silence as a filter for social parasites. Not everyone deserves access to you. Not every question requires an answer. Not every silence needs to be filled. This seems obvious when stated plainly, but watch how you behave in practice. A co-worker asks about your weekend plans. You answer in detail. A stranger at a party asks what you do for a living. You explain your entire career trajectory. A family member asks why you are not married yet. You defend yourself. You justify. You explain. Each time you are giving away information to someone who has no right to it. And each time you are signaling that your boundaries are permeable. That anyone who asks can receive. That your inner world is public property. The silent person operates differently. They do not answer questions that do not serve them. They do not explain themselves to people who have no authority over them. They do not defend their choices to those who are not affected by those choices. This is not rudeness. This is filtration. The The silent person is silently evaluating whether you deserve access to their mind. And most people fail the test, not because they are bad people, because they have not earned the right to know. Watch how differently people treat someone who does not immediately answer every question. There is a recalibration, a recognition that this person is not desperate for approval, that this person will not be manipulated by social pressure, that this person must be approached differently, more carefully, with more respect. You cannot command this respect by demanding it. You can only command it by withholding what most people give away for free. The social parasite, the person who takes your energy, your time, your information, relies on your compulsion to give. They ask. You answer. They take. The silent person breaks this cycle at the first step. They do not answer. The parasite moves on to an easier target, and that target is usually you. Section 6. The relationship between silence and perceived competence. There is a direct inverse correlation between how much someone speaks and how competent others perceive them to be. This has been demonstrated repeatedly in organizational psychology. The person who speaks less is assumed to be thinking more. The person who offers fewer opinions is assumed to have more considered opinions. The person who does not rush to answer is assumed to be weighing options carefully. Whether these assumptions are accurate is irrelevant. Perception is reality in social hierarchy. The silent person benefits from this bias without having to prove anything. They are given the benefit of the doubt that the talkative person must earn through constant demonstration of value. And even then, the talkative person is often dismissed as shallow, as desperate, as insecure, because the assumption is that those who speak constantly have something to prove, and those who speak rarely have nothing to prove. The silent person does not correct this assumption. They allow it to work in their favor. They allow you to fill the silence with your own projections of their intelligence, their depth, their authority. And because you are the one who created these projections, you are emotionally invested in maintaining them. You cannot later decide the silent person is foolish without admitting that your own judgment was flawed. So you protect your original assessment. You give them more deference. You take them more seriously, all because they said nothing. This is not manipulation in the active sense. It is leverage extracted from the cognitive biases you cannot turn off. Studies on courtroom juries have found that defendants who speak less are often perceived as more credible. The same principle applies in job interviews. The candidate who answers concisely and then stops is seen as more confident than the candidate who rambles. Less is always more when the observer is filling in the gaps with positive assumptions. Section 7. How silence disarms verbal aggression. The person who attacks with words expects a verbal response. They expect defense. They expect justification. They expect escalation. They expect the pattern that every social interaction has trained you to perform. The silent person denies them this. When someone raises their voice, makes an accusation, or attempts to provoke, the silent person simply waits, does not respond, does not react, does not acknowledge. This is not passive. It is aggressive in its own way, because the verbal aggressor is left holding their own anger with nowhere to put it. They have thrown a punch that landed on nothing, and now they look foolish. Now they look out of control. Now they look like the problem. The silent person did not defeat them in argument. The silent person refused to participate in the argument at all, and in doing so, revealed that the argument was never necessary. This technique is used in hostage negotiation. In the exchange begins, because they have not agreed to play by the rules that require them to lose, and the verbal aggressor, accustomed to opponents who play by those rules, has no strategy for someone who simply opts out. In marital conflict research, the most destructive pattern is demand-withdraw. One person demands, the other withdraws. The demander escalates. The withdrawer withdraws further. The silent person is not withdrawing. They are present. They are just not engaging. This distinction is critical. Withdrawal is escape. Strategic silence is presence without participation. And that is far more unsettling to an aggressor than someone who runs away. Section 8. The uncomfortable truth about your need to speak here is the truth you will want to reject. You speak because you're afraid of what happens if you do not. Afraid of being forgotten. Afraid of being dismissed. Afraid of being seen as less intelligent, less interesting, less valuable than the person next to you. Your words are not communication. They are reassurance. They are the verbal equivalent of checking a locked door multiple times to make sure it is actually locked. The compulsion to speak is a compulsion to manage your own anxiety at the expense of your own power. Section 8. The uncomfortable truth about your need to speak. Here is the truth you will want to reject. You speak because you are afraid of what happens if you do not. Afraid of being forgotten. Afraid of being dismissed. Afraid of being seen as less intelligent, less interesting, less valuable than the person next to you. Your words are not communication. They are reassurance. They are the verbal equivalent of checking a locked door multiple times to make sure it is actually locked. The compulsion to speak is a compulsion to manage your own anxiety at the expense of your own power. Every time you fill a silence that did not need to be filled, you are telling everyone watching that you cannot sit with yourself, that you need external validation to feel real, that you will trade information for acceptance, that you are, in the most basic sense, easy to manage. The silent person has made peace with the discomfort you are still running from. They do not need to prove their value because they are not seeking your approval. They do not need to fill the silence because they are not threatened by it. They do not need to answer every question because they are not afraid of your judgment. And that peace, that stillness, that refusal to perform, it reads as power. Because in a world of people desperate to be seen, the person who does not need to be seen becomes the person everyone looks at. You cannot fake this. You cannot simply decide to speak less and expect the same effect. The silence must be genuine. It must come from a place of not needing. And that is the work most people will never do. It is easier to keep talking, keep explaining, keep justifying, keep performing. But easier has never been the path to power. Consider the last time you were in a group and someone made a statement you disagreed with. Did you immediately correct them? Did you feel a physical urge to speak? That urge is not about truth. It is about your need to be seen as correct. The silent person feels that urge and lets it pass. They know that being right is less important than being perceived as someone who does not need to prove they are right. Section 9. The mirror of silence reveals others. When you stop speaking, something interesting happens. Other people begin to reveal themselves. Without your verbal output to structure the interaction, they are forced to take the lead, and in taking the lead, they show you who they are. The insecure person will fill the silence with nervous chatter. The arrogant person will fill it with self-promotion. The manipulative person will fill it with questions designed to extract information. The honest person may sit with you in the silence. The silent person watches all of this without participating. They learn more in 5 minutes of strategic silence than most people learn in 5 hours of conversation, because most people cannot help but perform when given the stage. They will tell you their fears, their desires, their resentments, their insecurities, all while believing they are simply having a normal conversation. The silent person collects this data, not for malicious purposes, simply because knowledge is power, and power is neutral. What you do with it determines whether you are ethical or not. But the point stands. You cannot learn about someone while you are talking. You can only learn about them while you are listening. And most people never learn anything because they never stop performing long enough to observe. The silent person has mastered the art of strategic observation. They enter every interaction as a student of human behavior, and they leave with a complete psychological profile of everyone in the room, while you leave with nothing except the memory of your own voice. In clinical psychology, this is similar to the concept of active listening, but active listening still requires response. Strategic silence requires nothing except presence. You are not reflecting. You are not paraphrasing. You are not validating. You are simply there. And the other person, uncomfortable with the void, fills it with themselves. This is not therapy. It is intelligence gathering. And the silent person is the most effective intelligence officer in any room. Section 10. Silence as a boundary. Enforcement mechanism. Boundaries are not what you say. Boundaries are what you do. And one of the most effective boundary enforcement mechanisms available to you is selective silence. When someone asks an inappropriate question, the talkative person feels compelled to answer or to offer a lengthy explanation of why they will not answer. Both responses give the other person what they want, attention and information about your limits. The silent person simply does not respond. The question hangs in the air, unanswered, unacknowledged. The person who asked is left to interpret the silence, and most people, when met with silence, will answer their own question. They will fill the void with an apology. They will retreat. They will recalibrate. Not because you told them to, because your silence told them that the boundary is not negotiable. It is not up for discussion. It simply exists, and they must adapt to it. This is far more effective than any verbal boundary statement. Verbal boundaries can be argued with, can be negotiated, can be worn down. Silence cannot. Silence is a wall, not a conversation. The person who says very little is not inviting discussion about what they will and will not tolerate. They are demonstrating it. And demonstration is always more powerful than declaration. Watch how quickly people learn not to ask certain questions of the silent person. Watch how quickly they learn not to make certain demands. Not because they were told, because they tried, met silence, and learned that silence is final. You can achieve this too, but it requires accepting that some people will interpret your silence as rudeness, and that their interpretation is not your problem. The silent person has internalized a truth that most never grasp. You do not need to be liked by everyone. You only need to be respected by those who matter. And respect is not earned through accessibility. It is earned through inaccessibility, through the clear signal that not Everyone gets in. Section 11. The difference between silence and avoidance. It is important to distinguish strategic silence from anxious withdrawal. Many people who speak little are not exercising power. They are hiding. They are afraid. They are socially anxious. And their silence reads not as authority, but as weakness. The difference is detectable. The person who is silent from power is comfortable in their silence. Their body language is open. Their gaze is steady. They are not looking for an escape. They are not fidgeting. They are not waiting for the interaction to end. They are present. They are observing. They are choosing not to speak. The person who is silent from fear is broadcasting their discomfort. Their eyes dart toward exits. Their posture is closed. Their silence is not strategic. It is paralytic. And everyone in the room can tell the difference. The power of saying very little comes from the choice to say very little. Not from the inability to speak. Not from social anxiety. Not from a lack of confidence. From the deliberate, calculated decision that speaking does not serve your interests in this moment. That is power. That is control. That is the silent person you fear and respect. The person who could speak but chooses not to. The person who has something to say but is saving it. The person who is not waiting for permission but is waiting for the right moment. Most people cannot sit in that space. The anxiety of holding back is too great. They release the pressure by speaking. The silent person has learned to tolerate the pressure, has learned that the pressure is information, has learned that the moment they release it, they lose the leverage it represents. Observe the difference in any high-stakes setting. The anxious, silent person looks down. The strategic silent person looks at you. One is avoiding, the other is watching. One is hoping not to be seen. The other knows they are being seen and does not care. One is a target, the other is a predator. The difference is not in the absence of words, it is in the presence of everything else. Section 12. How silence creates scarcity. Value economics teaches that scarcity increases value. The same principle applies to verbal output. The person who speaks constantly has made their words cheap. Their opinions are abundant. Their attention is abundant. Their reactions are abundant. None of it is valued because none of it is rare. The silent person has made their words expensive. When they speak, people listen. Not because what they say is always profound, because the very fact that they are speaking signals that this moment is important, that this topic matters, that this response has been considered, not reflexively generated. The silent person has cultivated verbal scarcity, and scarcity commands attention. This is why the quietest person in the room is often the most influential. They have not earned influence through force of personality. They have earned it through the simple economics of supply and demand. They supply fewer words. The demand for these words increases. The value of each word increases. And when they finally speak, their single sentence carries more weight than 10 minutes of someone else's monologue. You can observe this in any high-stakes meeting. The person who speaks last is often the person who decides the outcome. Not because they are smarter, because they have heard everyone else's position. They have collected all the data, and now they speak with the authority of someone who has nothing left to learn. The person who speaks first reveals their position before gathering information. The person who speaks constantly reveals their position repeatedly, allowing others to adjust. The silent person reveals nothing until the moment of maximum impact, and then they speak exactly as much as necessary, no more, no less. In marketing, this is called the principle of scarcity. Limited supply increases perceived value. The silent person is not a product, but they are applying the same psychological principle. Their words are limited edition, and humans are wired to want what is rare. The talkative person is the commodity. The silent person is the luxury good. Which one do you think commands higher value? Section 13. The role of silence in power. Negotiations. Every negotiation is a test of who needs the outcome more. The person who needs more speaks more. The person who needs more reveals more. The person who needs more concedes more. Silence is the primary tool for concealing need. When you stop speaking, you stop revealing. When you stop revealing, the other party cannot assess how much you want what they have. They cannot find your pressure points. They cannot determine how far they can push. This is why experienced negotiators use silence as their opening move. They state their position, then they stop. They do not justify. They do not explain. They do not fill the silence with concessions disguised as clarification. They simply wait. And in that waiting, they force the other party to reveal themselves. The other party must either accept the position, counter it, or sit in the silence. Most cannot sit. They will counter. And in countering, they reveal their own position, their own needs, their own weaknesses. The silent negotiator has learned everything. The talkative negotiator has learned nothing except that they cannot tolerate the pause. This applies to salary negotiations, to relationship discussions, to any interaction where two parties want different things. The person who speaks less controls the flow of information. The person who controls the flow of information controls the negotiation, not through clever arguments, through the simple discipline of not speaking until the other person has said everything they are going to say. Most people cannot do this. They interrupt, they fill, they rescue, they lose. In FBI hostage negotiation training, one of the first lessons is this: after you ask a question, shut up. Do not fill the silence. Do not rephrase. Do not add pressure. Just wait. The other person will eventually speak, and what they say will be more valuable than anything you could have said. The silent person has internalized this lesson. They apply it not just in negotiations, but in every interaction. And the result is that they consistently extract more value from every conversation than the person who cannot stop talking. Section 14. The relationship between silence and emotional regulation. Emotional regulation is the ability to manage your internal state without external intervention. Most people have very little of it. They speak to regulate. They vent. They complain. They seek reassurance. They ask questions they already know the answer to. Each of these behaviors is an attempt to outsource emotional management to someone else. The silent person does not do this. They sit with their emotions. They observe them. They let them pass without requiring anyone else to witness or validate them. This is not suppression. It is regulation. The silent person is not denying their feelings. They are simply not using their feelings as an excuse to demand attention from others. This makes them difficult to manipulate. Most manipulation operates by triggering an emotional response and then exploiting the verbal output that follows. Make someone angry, and they will say things they regret. Make someone insecure, and they will reveal things they should have kept private. Make someone anxious, and they will agree to things they should have rejected. The silent person has short-circuited this loop. They feel the emotion. They do not express it verbally. The manipulator, waiting for the expected output, receives nothing and has no idea whether their tactic worked. This is profoundly disorienting to people who are used to controlling others through emotional provocation. The silent person is not a puzzle they can solve, not a button they can push, not a script they can run. And in that uncertainty, the silent person has already won. Research on emotion regulation shows that the ability to tolerate distress without acting on it is one of the strongest predictors of psychological health and social power. The silent person has mastered this tolerance. They can feel anger without shouting, fear without fleeing, insecurity without seeking reassurance. And because they can, they are never controlled by the moment. They are always operating from a place of choice. That is the definition of power. Final section, the cold conclusion. You have spent your entire life believing that words create connection, that speaking makes you visible. That verbal output is the currency of social value. This belief has cost you more than you know. It has cost you your information, your leverage, your mystery, your power. Every word you have spoken in service of anxiety has been a word that could have remained unsaid. Every silence you have filled has been an opportunity to observe that you chose to interrupt. Every question you have answered has been a boundary you chose not to enforce. The person who says very little is not born. They are made through the uncomfortable acceptance that most words are unnecessary, that most people are not listening, that most silence is safe, that your value is not diminished by your absence from conversation, that your power increases in direct proportion to your refusal to perform. You will not become this person overnight. The urge to speak is too deeply conditioned. The fear of silence is too deeply embedded. But you can begin. You can pause before responding. You can notice when you are speaking to manage anxiety rather than to communicate. You can choose to let the silence stand. And over time, the silence will stop feeling like death. It will start feeling like home, like control, like the only honest response to a world of people who have forgotten how to listen. The silent person is not waiting for permission to speak. They are waiting for a reason, and most of the time, no reason comes. So they say nothing, and in saying nothing, they say everything that needs to be said about themselves, about the people around them, about the nature of power in a world drowning in noise. The question is not whether you can learn to speak less. The question is whether you can tolerate what you find when the noise stops. Most cannot. Those who can are the ones everyone else is watching, silently, carefully, without you ever knowing. The silence is already here. It has always been here. You just never stop talking long enough to notice. Now you have no excuse.